Hi there. You're listening to Poetry, Gossip, and the Pursuit of Pleasure with Dale Byron. That's me. And this really is a podcast to explore creative and practical ways that poetry can help us understand and navigate our lives a little bit better. And no subject really is off limits, from the most joyful to the most difficult, and losses and that sort of thing. Everything is fair game. And the goal is really not only to know more. Of course, the goal is to know more and to understand more, but it's also to feel more. And I think the real idea of that is that when our intellect, or our head, as it's called, and our heart, or our emotions, are more fully integrated, then we have a much better chance, at least at little small bits of wisdom. And so, at least that's the idea here. So, this week's podcast is entitled You're Not Alone. You Are Not Alone, the Healing Power of Poetry. And of course, in this episode, we're going to take on a very human feeling. We've all felt that sense of aloneness, that sense of alienation. It's a feeling that we all have. And of course, it's a feeling that no one really wants to have. Um, when we're in the grip of this feeling, at least my own experience is that it's hard to see the other end of it. Like, when are we not going to feel alone? It feels so solid and so dense. And as I said, we can feel alienated from others. We can feel that way with the natural world, sort of separate from, and ultimately ourselves. And it's a really difficult feeling and emotion to have. And as we'll see in this episode with the poems that I've selected, I hope you'll find that's true, that these poems show that we are not alone. They show that others have felt as we feel, in our aloneness and our disconnection, and that others have struggled with what we struggle with, and that others have even felt that shame sometimes that we can feel when we're feeling really separate from, different from, and yeah, all of that is all wrapped up together. And I think that the right poems can remind us also, and this is very important, that there is joy. There's actually joy on the other side of that dense feeling of aloneness. And in reconnecting our human birthright to connection, then we can experience at times that sense of joy. Fortunately, as I've said, and again, I hope you'll agree with me, that we've got some amazing poetry today to serve up, to discuss this feeling of separateness and aloneness, and to show us that we are not alone. And these may be poems. I hope that some of these poems will be ones that you'll want to note and pull aside, look up and find for your own poetry first aid kit. But, let's start with a very famous poet and a little tiny piece of a poem, the Divine Commedia by Dante. And I think it's one of the best poetic expressions of what it feels like in those times when we're feeling alone and alienated. It goes like this. This is a translation by Robert Bly, by the way. It goes, "In the middle of the road of my life," said Dante in the Divine Commedia, "in the middle of the road of my life, I awoke in a dark wood where the true way was wholly lost." Can you feel that? In the middle of the road of my life, I awoke in a dark wood where the true way was wholly lost. Ah, how hard a thing it is to tell what a wild and rough and stubborn wood this was, which in my thought, renews the fear In other words, I am taken back by these words into the middle of this feeling of being deeply alone, afraid, anxious, and all of the above. So I think we can start out with that as a way of really getting into that territory, and imagining how it is that we get ourselves into these cul-de-sacs of feeling very alone, very alienated, very separate from not only others, but from even from ourselves, and of course, from the natural world. So the first poem we want to start with is it's a very short poem, and it's anonymous. It comes down through the ages, simply called the Druid Vow of Friendship. And it goes like this. It says, I honor your path. I honor your path. I drink from your well. I bring an unprotected heart to our meeting place. I hold no cherished outcome. I will not negotiate. I will not negotiate by withholding. I am not subject to disappointment. The Druid Vow of Friendship says, I honor your path. I honor your path. I drink from your well. I bring an unprotected heart to our meeting place. Just think of those first three lines. Think of the friends that you've had, that, those friendships that often send out, a, a life preserver to us, literally sometimes and metaphorically, when we are feeling alone and disconnected. And it's a kind of wonderful reminder that in a friendship where your path is honored, where the friend will drink from your well, in other words, I will listen to you fully. And I bring an unprotected heart to our meeting place. So even if you have difficult things to tell me, I will not judge you. I will not do that. I will simply listen. I will not also try to fix you, because when we're feeling alone and alienated and separate, oftentimes the last thing we want is to somebody to swoop in and try to fix us. That's the last thing we want. Even makes us feel more alone, often, I think. So the poem goes on. I hold no cherished outcome. Now, I thought that's a delicious way of saying, I will be with you. I will be with you in your aloneness as your friend. I will not judge you, and I have no cherished outcome. So I don't need for you to tell me that you figured it all out. I don't need for you to tell me that you're feeling better, because if you don't tell me that you're feeling better, maybe it will reflect on me somehow. I hold no cherished outcome. I will not negotiate by withholding. What an amazing poem to state this, and a friend who would be able to live into the words of this poem when we are feeling very alone. I will not negotiate by withholding. So, in other words, I'm not going to play those kind of games. And then finally, I am not subject. I am not subject to disappointment. Now, I've thought about that line. I've known about this poem for many years. And I thought about that poem originally, and I was like a little confused by it. Um, but I am not subject to disappointment, um, is this idea that you don't have to please me. You don't have to live your life. You don't have to, as I was saying before, you don't have to kind of have a happy ending to this conversation. It's okay, however you're feeling. You can feel alone. You can feel, separate. And let me just listen to that, which then gives us, paradoxically, as this poem does, it gives us the best chance to move beyond the aloneness, to see something which is beyond aloneness, beyond feeling separate. And the note that I made for myself is that naming something well, naming it well, I think, as this poem does, and naming it freshly, so creatively, well and creatively, which go together, always gives us, I think, a sense of hope and makes us feel, yes, less alone. And what's wonderful about that is that it's not like our aloneness or the conditions for our aloneness have been changed. Perhaps nothing has changed in the external world, but what has changed, what poems do help us do often, is change our internal experience, where that is the thing for our felt experience that matters most, that matters absolutely most. Um, and uh, so this is our first poem, the Druid Vow of Friendship. And what a delicious, I think, a little short little poem. And how delicious would it be for a friend to show up this way and for us to show up to our friends this way. So, again, remember our theme. You are not alone. You are not alone. There's a poem, another poem. This one does have an author that we know about. His name is Leonard Nathan, who lived here in the San Francisco Bay Area for many years, just passed not too many years ago. So, contemporary poet. And Leonard Nathan wrote a little poem called Kind, Kind, Kind. Let's hear it now. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed till a death took me outside and left me there, and left me there. That grass lifts so quietly to catch everything we drop. And we drop everything. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed till a death took me outside and left me there. That grass lifts so quietly to catch everything we drop. And we drop everything. I don't know about you, but I think that poem is both confrontive and healing, paradoxically difficult on one level and wonderfully healing on another, because we know it is true. We know that we do drop everything. One poet philosopher once said, you know, at some point we even lose loss. We lose loss. And so we know that to be true, but we also know what's really, to me, this Leonard Nathan, or at least the speaker in this poem, I hadn't noticed till a death took me outside and left me there. Have you ever had that feeling where something so difficult, so challenging has taken you outside and left you there? You know, like on the outside, where you imagine, if you can think of an image of being on the outside and you look inside the window of a house, and it's warm in there and people are talking and having fun and living their lives, and yet we are on the outside. We are outside of that, and we are in the cold, literally and metaphorically. Something has taken us outside, and not just taken us outside, but left us there. Now, this is one of those situations, to me, this piece is paradoxical because it's both difficult and confrontive, but it's also healing because we go, oh, I am not the only one who has felt that before. I am not the only one who has been taken outside and left there in the cold, perhaps, in the freezing cold, perhaps. I hadn't noticed. And the protagonist, the speaker in the poem, says, I hadn't noticed. till a death took me outside, till something took me outside. And it could be a death, could be some the loss of a again of a loved one, or the loss of something precious in our lives, or the loss of a dream that has been lost or has not worked out well, or even something not quite as traumatic, but a big loss, something that took us outside. I hadn't noticed till a death took me outside and left me there, that grass lifts so quietly to catch everything we drop, and we drop everything. Now, the last part of this poem also says how wonderful that this earth, this world, this grass holds us up and catches us when we drop and when we let fall. And when we fall, this earth that's there, this Mother Earth that is there. It's wonderful. Leonard Nathan. So let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's go a long way to the other side of the earth, actually, to a German poet who has not been around for, a little over 100 years, I think, since he passed, or right about 100 years. It's the German poet, amazing poet Rilke. By the way, I was just had the fortunate, grateful chance to be in Spain earlier this year, and went to a town called Ronda in Spain, which is this gorgeous town right on a great canyon. And it's a town that Rilke spent time in, and he's always been bigger than life to me. One of the poets that I absolutely love and have loved for a long time. And he actually stayed in this little town in Spain for quite a while, a couple months, and he broke through this writer's um, block that he was having and wrote some amazing poetry there. I don't think this particular poem, but anyway, it was just amazing. It was, again, I saw the hotel that's 120 years old or whatever when it was first built, and it was just bigger than life, just amazing. And there's a statue of him there. And anyway, it's great. Okay, but I digress. Rilke wrote a poem called The Panther, and I think it really speaks to this subject today of aloneness and feeling alienated. Let me read the poem and then we'll talk on the other side, as they say. From seeing the bars, his seeing is so exhausted. By the way, this version translation is done by the wonderful, amazing poet and translator Robert Bly. Okay. From seeing the bars, his seeing is so exhausted that it no longer holds anything anymore. To him, to him, the world is bars, bars. To him, the world is bars, 100,000 bars, and behind the bars, nothing. And behind the bars, nothing. The lithe swinging of that rhythmical, easy stride, which circles down to the tiniest hub, is like a dance of energy around a point in which a great will stands stunned and numb. Stunned and numb. Only at times the curtains of the pupil rise without a sound. Then a shape enters, slips through the tightened silence of the shoulders, reaches the heart, and dies. Only at times, the curtains of the pupil rise without a sound, without a sound. Then a shape enters, slips through the tightened silence of his shoulders, reaches the heart, and dies. But let that one sink in for just a minute. I've read that poem so many times and to so many people and classes and audiences over the years. And I still think and still say to this day that it is one of the most apt and I think precise descriptions of depression that I've ever heard in a poem. And I think that, again, this idea that if we can name something, if we can get it outside of our body and name it and see it and understand it and feel it through the metaphors of a poem like this, then somehow or another, we can't push it aside, but we can move through it. There's an expression that says you can't move around. The best way to deal with something is to step right through it, step right into it. And this is, I think, what Rilke is doing. And I think it gives us a sense of freedom, a sense that paradoxically describing aloneness and depression in this delicious, though very bleak way, gives us freedom to move forward in our lives. I'm reminded of the great poet William Stafford, who said, "This life is amazing, even in its bleakness, even in its bleakness." And I think Rilke says, only at times the curtains of the pupil rise. Can you see the panther pacing back and forth in that cage? By the way, I didn't mention, but Rilke, actually, I know he was in Paris, I believe, when he wrote this poem, actually, as I'm remembering, and because he was the secretary for the great sculptor Rodin, and Rodin had told Rilke or advised him to go to the zoo and just be there and watch the animals, just go out into the world. And he happened to be at the zoo, and this is what he came up with. Can you just see that panther, that great animal, um, nervously, anxiously, just going back and forth in that cage, being crazed by that captivity, and then only at times the curtains of the pupil rise without a sound. Then a shape enters, slips through the tightened silence of the shoulders, those massive, powerful shoulders, reaches the heart and dies. Goes nowhere. That power just held in such a way that is the depression feels that way. That things reach the heart, but then die. But again, the panther shows us that if we can name it, if we can speak it and describe the feeling, that we can move beyond it, move through it, and actually experience the joy on the other side. Now, speaking of joy, let's change gears completely. Let's just move in a whole different direction. That's what poems can do. That's what poetry can do. That's why your poetry first aid kit ought to have all kind of different poems in it, because I'm going to give you a whole different way to approach this idea that we're working with today. It's by E.E. Cummings. May my heart always be open. May my heart always be open. And E. E. Cummings said it this way, the great famous poet, um, who didn't capitalize, I should say, his poems, um, or his sentences in his poems. It goes like this. May my heart always be open to little birds who are the secrets of living. Whatever they sing is better than to know. Whatever they sing is better than to know. And if men should not hear them, men are old. Men are old. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and supple. And even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong. For whenever men are right, they are not young. Oh, let's stop there for just a minute. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and supple. And even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong. What I love about this is that the idea that when we are feeling alone and alienated and depressed, alone, deeply alone, separate, that often everything gets so solid, including everything that we know, and we are certain in those situations. And I'm not holding it against us. I've been there. I think we've all been there, where we are certain that we are never going to move beyond this feeling of aloneness. And yet, on some level of wisdom deep in our heart, we know that if we can stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and have a mind that's supple and even be wrong on Sunday, that even our religious convictions, we can hold them lightly. For whenever men are right, they are not young. I love that. Okay, let's finish the poem. And may myself do nothing usefully, and may myself do nothing usefully, and love yourself so more than truly. There's never been quite such a fool who could fail, pulling all the sky over him with one smile. E. E. Cummings, you have given us a poster child approach. You've given us a way to step back out of that feeling of aloneness or depression or feeling shamed by whatever rumination is floating around in our head. May my heart always be open. Let's say it again. May my heart always be open to little birds who are the secrets of living. Whatever they sing is better than to know. The feeling, sometimes again, the heart and the head. It's important, the ideas, but it's also critically important, the heart. We are never going to solve the major or resolve or even step into the big predicaments, whether it's political or ecological, whatever it is, and they all face us now, face us, barreling down on us like a speeding freight train. But we're not going to do it just with ideas. We're going to have to integrate the head and the heart. At least that's my belief. That's my belief. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and supple. And even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong. For whenever men are right, they are not young. You want to grow old before your time? What's the line in that song? I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. I love it. I love it. There's also an expression that a dear friend of mine says, this person is rarely conflicted, but always right. It's like somebody's always certain about everything. And even when we're depressed, we're almost always certain that we're never going to move beyond it. And the last line again, and the last stanza again. And may myself do nothing usefully. Just say that once in a while. You know, like the poet Mary Oliver says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to crawl on your knees for 100 miles in the desert repenting. Oh my, you say that in a culture that's been steeped in the Protestant work ethic, and people will look at you like you are crazy, but you are crazy good. And may myself do nothing usefully, and love yourself so more truly. There's never been quite such a fool who could fail, pulling all the sky over him with one smile. Oh, E. E. Cummings, thank you so much for that poem. And that's a different first aid poem for us for aloneness, to like little breadcrumbs to show us how to get back to that supple mind, to that feeling of youngness, to not be so old and set in our ways. Okay, we're going to end with this last poem by Mary Oliver. I just was talking about Mary Oliver and a different poem that talks about the Protestant ethic and that you need to be working all the time. It's not true. Okay. But this poem is, I think, a wonderful poem for those times, again, when something's taken us outside, we're on the outside, we're looking in, and we're feeling alone and separate and alienated. And yet these poems are telling us we are not alone. You are not alone. Okay. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, an amazing poet. Just lost her a few years ago to this plane anyway, but got a lot of great poems. Look her poems up. You'll love them. Look this one up. It's called The Wild Geese. Wild Geese, Mary Oliver. Actually, I just realized this is the poem I was just quoting. See how that works? Okay. It was on my mind. She starts out just like I was saying. You do not have to be good. There's blasphemy right there. You do not have to be good. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Oh, those first 5 lines. Let's do them one more time. Let's just slip through there one more time. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. You don't have to be good. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Oh, Mary Oliver, tell it. Tell me about despair, she says, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, no matter how alone, no matter how lonely, the world, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. You are needed. You are needed. You are needed to be connected. You are not alone. We need your gifts. We need your creativity. We need you to be part of this world with all its animals and plants and humans and all of it together. This great cosmos moving together. You are not alone. And these poems tell us again and again in all their different ways, and other ones that you can find, that will tell you you are not alone. You are understood. You are needed. You are cared for. You are part of everything. And as Mary Oliver said, it's worth repeating. The world offers itself to you, and your imagination calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things, of everything. Okay, we've come to the end of this edition. And I want to thank you for your listening ear. And again, as I always say, pass this along to others if you think that others would enjoy this approach to poetry and hitching it up to life's joys and challenges and griefs and losses and delights. Pass it along to them or make a comment wherever you listen to this. I will continue to do these videos. I will continue to post the audio as a podcast, of course. And until next time and next poem, as I always say, take good care of yourself.